The room went quiet like someone had turned off the music at a party. We were in conference room 7B for the monthly town hall, and the video feed had the regional store managers on one side and our corporate floor on the other. I had just finished explaining a liability I found in the contract for a $40,000 client rollout when my team lead leaned into the microphone and said, "No one would notice if you left." I remember the air tasted metallic. I am a liff. I worked as a retail operations analyst at Maple and Finch Retail, a mid-sized chain with about 180 stores in the United States. My job was messy in a good way. I tracked inventory, I ran risk models, I spoke to buyers and supply planners, and I kept a running list of things people usually ignored until they caused trouble. The $40,000 project was Project Beacon, a seasonal test for a new line of home goods sold to a single client, Northgate Home. The deal was simple in dollars, but complicated in logistics and contract language. One clause would cost us 20% of margin if returns passed a certain threshold. I warned them. I had sent a formal risk note 2 weeks before the town hall. The file name was Risk Assessment, Beacon 2024-03-12, PDF. It was in the project folder, attached to the kickoff invite for March 12th at 10 a.m., Conference Room 3A. I put numbers in the note. A 10% return rate would cut our projected gross margin by $6,000 on that order. A 20% return rate would melt into a 40% hit in profit if restocking fees applied. I used the past 3 season returns from our similar rollout in 2022. I did the math. I also traced the return clause to a newly added paragraph in the client contract that a buyer had approved without redlining it. I called it out in black and white. Maya was my team lead. She had the sort of confidence people mistake for competence. Her emails were polished. Her presentations had glossy slides. She loved being the voice in the room, but she had a deeper habit. When something went complicated, she pushed decisions forward without grappling with the hard parts. Her flaw was ego, pure and consistent. She wanted wins tied to visible milestones, not messy details. When I pushed back, she shrank the space I was allowed to create and broadened the spotlight she claimed for herself. At the town hall, I had presented that risk for 3 minutes. I said, "This clause means a 40% reduction in projected profit if we hit high return rates. I recommend we renegotiate or adjust the warranty language and set up a dedicated returns buffer." I had the slide with the math. The room hummed. Maya told me later she saw the slide, but instead of thanking me, she took the microphone and flattened me. She said, "No one would notice if you left." The words landed hard. The regional director glanced down. A store manager from Raleigh chimed in with a nervous laugh. I felt my face go tight, then strangely calm. I did not explode. I took a breath. I smiled politely. I finished the meeting and walked out. Instead of reacting, I saved the full town hall recording. I had learned early that our company recorded these sessions and transcribed them. I saved the transcript and wrote a short email to my own mailbox with a link to Risk Assessment Beacon 2024-03-12, PDF and the town hall time stamp. I filed that email into a folder called Beacon Evidence. It was a small thing. It mattered later. The fallout began slow and then quickened. I will list the stages not because I want to catalog harm, but because things got worse in neat, painful steps. First, escalation, the fulfillment error. Maya insisted on fast execution to hit Q2 metrics. I had pushed for a returns buffer stock. She said we could absorb small variants. She approved an expedited purchase order to clear a warehouse backlog without the buffer line I requested. The vendor invoice number was INV 9873. The expedited fees came to $975. We lost a day in transit. On April 4th, clients started calling. The first 40% of the order shipped fine. The second 40% sat on a dock because the label format for Northgate Home was wrong. That mistake created stockouts in 22 stores during the first weekend of the launch. Merchandising called my team angry. Stores lost an estimated $18,000 in sales over that weekend. They blamed my team for not catching the label issue in quality assurance. I stayed calm. I pulled the shipping logs, the vendor invoice, and the ticket history from our internal system. The tickets showed that Maya had approved the expedite on March 29th at 9 p.m. The chat export from our internal messaging platform, MapleChat, showed she had dismissed my request for a labeling checklist as bureaucratic. I saved every line. I wrote a short email summarizing the shipping timeline, attached the evidence, and sent it to the project folder. I did not attach it to a mass reply. I quietly added one person in the loop, Michael from supply chain, who had been helpful before. Second escalation, pricing and penalty. Our client, Northgate Home, had a clause that penalized us if returns exceeded 5%. A buyer on the other side had made a custom discount structure for the first order and had not transferred final pricing to the order management system. Maya thought the discount looked generous, but signed off on the final checklist. That miscommunication triggered a reprice on 3,800 units. Northgate Home flagged a potential adjustment and withheld payment until the pricing discrepancy was reconciled. That withheld payment was $32,000. The finance team opened a dispute. They asked for the approval chain. Maya produced a single approval email, her name on top, and said it had been an oversight and, strangely, looked like a process error in my queue. They tried to pin the approval on me. They said my queue had not closed the pricing ticket. I calmly pulled up the audited ticket log. It showed the ticket was closed by Maya at 9:05 p.m. on April 1st. The ticket number was TCK 4421. I also had saved a dated spreadsheet I had created showing the pricing finalization on March 28th and addressed to Maya with the subject price finalization Beacon 2024-03-28, XLSX. I had forwarded it to her and to the buyer. She had acknowledged with a short noted in MapleChat. I had the ACK timestamp. I zipped everything into a folder and uploaded it to a secure shared drive with a note: evidence, pricing, and shipping. I copied supply chain and finance. I kept my tone clinical. I did not call her out publicly. The dispute led to long email threads. For 2 weeks, the financial hold hurt our cash flow and painted my team as sloppy. Third escalation, the compliance audit. 2 months in, a complaints pile started to grow. Northgate Home returned a shipment with damaged packaging beyond our usual rates. The quality team opened a formal complaint and reported a possible breach of our own loss prevention standard operating procedure V14. The compliance team began an audit. This is where the 3 departments collided: merchandising, supply chain, and customer experience. The audit team requested all approvals, all shipping logs, vendor receipts, and the contract pages highlighted in the original deal. Someone leaked a line to a floor rumor mill that Elif missed 3 warnings. My inbox filled with blind carbon copy emails and pointed questions. The rumor spread faster than facts. I hit a low point here. They placed me on a shadow review list for 2 weeks. My desk was quiet. I watched Maya move through the corridors like she had always been inside a bubble. Meetings were called where I was not present. Someone in merchandising accused me in a closed meeting of not owning the project. I learned about that later because someone sent me the meeting minutes. For a moment, everything I had built felt like it was unraveling. The 3 department heads were frustrated. The client was asking for a full explanation. My name was floated as the scapegoat. I felt sick. I went home and stared at the risk assessment file. I believed I had lost. I did one more thing before I let myself fall apart. I pulled the documentation trail together. I printed emails. I exported MapleChat threads. I downloaded the payment dispute numbers from finance, invoice INV 9873, and the debit memo DM 3012. I pulled the contract PDF and highlighted the return clause with a yellow marker. I printed the meeting invite for the March kickoff that showed my attached risk note. I put everything in a folder labeled Beacon Legal Escalation. I did not show it to anyone. I kept working on corrective tasks, answering questions, and running damage control where I could without stepping into dramatic confrontation. I stayed calm again. When a manager shouted at a supply coordinator across the room, I walked out instead of arguing. The turning point felt like walking into a storm. Northgate Home, frustrated and cash-hungry, demanded a public town hall on June 12th at 9 a.m. They wanted answers. Leadership wanted answers. The regional director scheduled an external town hall in Conference Room 9C and invited the client, our executive leadership, and 5 regional store managers. This town hall had teeth. I received a calendar invite with the subject Beacon Client Review 2024-06-1209. 00 Conference Room 9C. The entire project was on the line. Maya was scheduled to lead. I was on the attendee list. 2 days before the town hall, I made one last careful move. I created a concise evidence packet. It had the following items: risk assessment, Beacon 2024-03-12. PDF. The March 29th MapleChat export showing Maya saying bureaucratic. The vendor invoice INV 9873 with the expedited fee. The ticket closure TCK 4421 showing Maya as the closer. The pricing spreadsheet price finalization Beacon 2024-03-28. XLSX. The disputed payment note for $32,000. And the contract page with the return clause highlighted. I also included the town hall transcript where Maya had said, "No one would notice if you left." I printed 2 full copies, one for me and one for a quiet ally I trusted, Michael from Supply Chain. He had been copied on my earlier emails and had been watching the audit unfold. On the morning of June 12th, conference room 9C was full. The client had brought their buyer, a woman named Claire, and a stern-looking legal counsel. Our chief executive officer was there, sitting in the front row. Maya started her presentation with bright slides and a fast tempo. She framed the rollout as a hiccup. Then Claire asked a direct question about the return rate and the clause. Maya answered in broad strokes and then shifted blame to operational missteps. The room hummed. The chief executive officer looked at Maya and asked where the initial risk assessment lived. I stood up. My palms were steady. I will admit there was a small thrill in my chest. I walked to the table and placed my evidence packet in front of the room. I said, "Before we go further, I want to show the team what happened." I did not rant. I summarized the facts. I said, "I flagged the contract clause on March 12th in Risk Assessment Beacon 2024-03-12, PDF. I recommended adjusting the warranty language or setting a returns buffer." That note is attached to the kickoff invite on March 12th at 10 a.m. I clicked open my laptop and projected the document timestamp. The projection showed the file name and the timestamp. I then played the MapleChat export and highlighted Maya's reply where she dismissed the buffer. I played the ticket log with TCK 4421 showing the closure by her name and the vendor invoice showing the expedited fee. The room shifted. Claire frowned. The chief executive officer leaned forward. People started speaking at once. Maya's face went a shade paler. For a second, she tried to redirect. She said, "We were under pressure to meet launch dates. Decisions had to be made." I stayed calm. I said, "Yes, and the decision to remove the returns buffer and approve the expedited purchase are recorded. The pricing spreadsheet I shared on March 28th shows we raised the pricing flag. The ticket was closed by Maya at 9:05 p.m. on April 1st. The contract clause was visible before we signed." My voice was steady. I did not savor the moment, then Michael stood up. He said, "I was copied on the ticket, I did not close it." He had a print of the supply chain log. He pointed to a line where an automatic system action stamped the closure when a manual override happened. It matched the hour Maya logged in. He said, "I did not override it." The legal counsel for Northgate Home requested the contract pages. We handed them over. The client lawyer opened to the highlighted clause and read it. She said, "This was in plain language. Why was this not negotiated?" Maya's voice crumpled in a way I had not heard. For a moment, she tried to frame everything as a team failure. Then the chief executive officer asked a pointed question about why the pricing ticket showed only one approval. Under pressure, Maya's ego flared. She started to defend herself, and in a clumsy attempt to make herself look decisive, she admitted she had closed the ticket to avoid further delay. She said, "I closed it. I thought I was protecting the timeline." She looked at me and added, "I thought you were holding us back." In the room, the sentence landed as a confession. It was the admission I needed. It was not dramatic or theatrical. It was real and messy. It was the truth, drawn out by the documents. The chief executive officer asked her directly if she had seen the risk assessment. Maya could not deny the file timestamp. The client asked for a path to remediation. The chief executive officer proposed an immediate remedial plan that would require a dedicated returns buffer and rebate to the client worth $5,000. The conversation turned to next steps, not blame shifting. In that hour, the team's story shifted from my supposed negligence to a series of decisions that had been made at the team lead level and then defended as nimble heroics. What happened to Maya after that meeting was not instant, and it was not theatrical. She was placed on a formal performance review. The company launched a process review for escalation and approval pathways. The chief executive officer asked talent and people to update training and to require dual approvals on pricing tickets over $10,000. Supply chain reworked the labeling checklist as mandatory on all international style shipments. Maya was removed from Project Beacon leadership and Ray assigned to a different portfolio that was less client-facing. She lost a promotion she was in line for. She kept her job because the issues were not criminal. They were bad choices and poor leadership. Consequences were real but measured. That was satisfying. My role did not flip overnight into vindication. There were still some who assumed I had done something wrong because rumor had already spread. But the record did what evidence does. It neutralized the gossip. I was offered the chance to lead the corrective action because I knew the nuts and bolts and because I had owned the documentation. I said no. I did not want to patch a ship that had been steered where I had warned it would be steered. I refused to be the person who quietly rescued her when she had publicly declared I did not matter. I told him, I will not be the cleanup crew for decisions that ignored my written warnings. That line shifted the tone. The chief executive officer looked at me and then said, "We respect that." 2 weeks later, I accepted a role with Brightleaf Retail Solutions as Senior Operations Manager. The offer came with a 20% salary increase and a promise of a clear escalation policy I had been pushing for. I left Maple and Finch 3 weeks after the town hall. I gave 3 weeks' notice. People came by my desk. Some were apologetic, some were cautious. Maya stopped me in the corridor once and said, "I did not mean what I said." I nodded and smiled. I kept my face calm. I did not accept a private call to fix her reputation. I did not need to. There were small surprises in the aftermath. 2 months after I left, Northgate Home renewed the contract with Maple and Finch under new terms, including a dedicated returns buffer and updated warranty language. The client buyer sent a short note to me and copied the chief executive officer. She said, "Thank you for being the one who made us go back to the numbers." That line felt quietly satisfying. Maple and Finch announced the policy change on internal channels. The announcement credited the cross-functional team and the new approval process. It did not name names. What I learned is simple. Document everything. If you see a risk, write it down and timestamp it. Save the ticket IDs, the invoice numbers, the chat exports, and the calendar invites. Stay calm. There is power in a steady voice and a copy of the file. And finally, do not be the person who cleans up what someone else recklessly broke. There is dignity in letting consequences occur when they are due.